Hello and welcome to Of Mooks and Monsters. I'm Rob Ward.
And I'm Tim Niederreiter, and this is episode 119 of the podcast.
Today we're going to be talking about ease. Sometimes as game masters, we want our players to succeed. Sometimes wanting them to succeed can get in the way of running a interesting, fun game.
Absolutely, I think this is a particular problem I've had running a few of the systems I've done. But if your players are succeeding with what they feel like is not much effort, that's really when it becomes an issue. I think if they always just steamroller over every obstacle,
Mm-hmm. And Monty Hall, is that what it's called?
Yeah, that was the old D&D term for it. It was the Monty Hall, where the DM just gave you all this treasure, and the monsters were pushovers. You could wipe them out easily, and and that's one of the reasons I think that's an AD&D term or even basic. So it goes way back, but it became a thing. By the time I started playing third edition, it was definitely a thing, and I don't remember having much trouble actually having it with that issue in D&D because it's such a rules heavy system. At least in the old editions, it was where you have hit points. You got all these things that if you roll if the dice fall in your favor, it still takes a couple hits to kill all the monsters, that kind of thing. So it's not as, a couple is maybe a little low to think about. But my point is that a fight in D&D is inherently kind of balanced because of the different kinds of things you need to do to win. Whereas in a game like Mutants and Masterminds, a single die roll can put your opponent out of the fight, can put the bad guy down. So it takes a lot of effort, a lot of wariness of the GM to make sure Mutants and Masterminds doesn't become too simple, especially because you're often dealing with a single supervillain in the fight. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah. And so to approach this, I usually play games where the players are always kind of at a disadvantage, like Call of Cthulhu, where they are just outranked by the character. Like they're told to run essentially by everything that's statistically going on. But it is a very fascinating question because we want, as game masters, our stories to continue, and we want our players to not feel like they're being crushed at every opportunity. But maybe so for Mutants and Masterminds, I always heard that making your villain that your party is facing like something like 4 times the level.
Oh, really? Okay, so for a PL power levels higher. Okay.
Yeah, that's 4 or 5 power levels higher because otherwise it's just a 3-on-1, a 2-on-1.
Yeah.
That's what I was taught. That's when I was reading that book the first time.
Man, I've forgotten. I've forgotten more about Mutants and Masterminds than most people will ever know. But I definitely forgot that. So I was trying like 2 power levels higher, but that's just getting into the specifics. It's not that important. I think it is important to Mutants and Masterminds, but it's not more. But to generalize it, yeah, definitely having in a combat encounter like in D&D, you can have the same kind of thing happen if there's one big monster, even a pretty tough like an ogre, and your party's level 3 or whatever, level 2, maybe whatever level it is. But your party is basically just wailing on this one ogre, and he gets one attack, and the party keeps wailing on him. And that's kind of boring, right? That's the kind of a not dynamic way to run a game, run a combat encounter, especially.
It really does get that way, especially with Mutants and Masterminds.
Right, because Mutants and Masterminds, you need quite a few characters like villains and stuff in some terms to distract the heroes, to make the heroes have to split up or handle different problems.
Mm-hmm. Or there could be I would like it seems like it's a matter of power level with that game in particular.
It is definitely
with a singular villain, they want to be extremely powerful. And they outrank. It's only by working together as a team can they defeat this villain.
Yeah.
there's also the idea of if there's two villains, maybe I remember like one of my favorite fights that I had in a Mutants and Masterminds game was when we faced a, a guy by the name of the Pugnacious Pugilist.
No, his name was Punch Man.
Yeah, but that's what he called himself.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah, uh, Punch Man, and he had this little man on his shoulder called like Graviton or something like that.
I think so, yeah.
Who could like he had this enormous ability to like shift, uh, uh you know, for like airwaves or something.
He
Because I
control
was
gravity,
trying to,
I think.
yeah, because I was trying to dive bomb through this window, and I kept on getting parried.
Yeah.
And someone just so like you could have it where like one villain is a distraction, one villain is the actual power, or you can have two that are just still more powerful than both of you, but like whatever the game is. But I feel like there should always the reason that heroes are able to be heroes is because they overcome obstacles.
Yes.
And if you have your villains, like depending on the size of the party, bumped up quite a few levels, they're going to have to. There's a chance that they might fail, and then they have to approach this next battle with them through a different mindset and a different strategy.
Absolutely. I think that you hit on something there, that the teamwork, with Punchman and Graviton. I remember that being like, okay, Punchman he's pretty. I mean, at least most of his powers were just related to being kind of a big tough guy, and Graviton's powers related to protect were basically mostly used in that fight, at least if I recall, to protect Punchman. So Punchman was kind of so they worked as a team, and that teamwork is the sort of thing player characters do all the time, and it happens kind of automatically because there's table talk and the heroes figure out what to do. And I think considering that sort of thing as a DM, as a game master, is a good way to think about it, because then consider that for your villains, for your PC's opposition, because then you don't have to necessarily ramp them up by 10 power level, by 2 power levels or 4 power levels. You can have, because I feel like you don't want to inflate it and inflate power levels just to make, except in the case of like the super villains, the big bads. I don't think it makes sense to have every villain be higher power level than every PC, right? So,
well, I mean, I would argue against. I would. I'd go for a point because it seems like your battles have been like, if the battle is getting too easy and this has been going on for a while, I mean, something needs to change.
No, for sure. But I've never really done that much with teamwork, to be honest. I think that's part of it. Like if you have a villain that two villains that effectively are one character, if it's for combat, like Punchman and Graviton. Graviton is sitting on his shoulder or whatever, so we don't really know. I mean, we barely even knew he was there at first, right? We just knew. I mean, and that kind of thing is really cool. Like they're working in concert, so they don't need to be quite as powerful. That's what I was getting at.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, that's so teamwork. Having your villains fight as a team is is kind of a tricky thing.
Yeah,
because usually it's like you two take these, you two take those. So maybe that's something to play with in the future.
Definitely, and there are qualities like that. You can to go back to the Dungeons and Dragons example. You can do that with monsters. Iron golems are immune to fire. Red dragons breathe fire, and of course, PCs are generally averse to being set ablaze. So, if you're Iron Golem and it's in a battle with a bunch of characters, it's like the meat shield, and then the dragon's breath can just bathe it, and it doesn't care. But the players are doomed, if that dragon's breath hits them. It's that kind of thing.
Oh, absolutely.
That's the teamwork. That's the kind of thing I'm thinking about. It doesn't have to always be like two super villains glued together to make one super villain.
Yeah, so like maybe having your villains team up and work in concert with each other would be effective. It also, I feel this also kind of brings up a good point of like, this is, as a team, your players have to work together to overcome an obstacle. And it's by finding those weak points and finding those opportunities for each other to cover like each other's backs, because that usually happens in role playing games where someone like at the fifth or sixth battle, everyone knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
Okay, you're on range attack, you're healing, you're just slaughtering things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I definitely, I definitely think that's true. And having the power, and that's kind of where I'm getting at with why it's important to put a level of difficulty into especially combat encounters, because not only does that make the game more satisfying, but having the players have to work together is really important because it makes them have to feel like that's the game part of this game in some ways, right?
True. Yes, very.
Uh, so yeah, so that's dead on, and I think it, ways to. And I guess it's a little more challenging. It's a little challenging in Masterminds because sometimes because the powers can vary so wildly. So
Mm-hmm.
just having a status quo encounter, an encounter that you just pulled out of a book, for example, like out of a module for Mutants and Masterminds. This is probably a reason there aren't that many Mutants and Masterminds modules, to be honest, is because your parties
True.
vary
Yeah.
so much. The parties vary so broadly. It's really hard to predict what they can do in just a stranger's game.
It is, yes, very much. Another strategy I would kind of employ as a GM is maybe have like if this is going on, and this is kind of a nuclear option. Um, if your players have been going through troubles so easily, I would I would test how far they just kind of test how far they can go. Don't try to like actively TPK them,
Yeah.
but really give them a nasty fight. Like I just had this in my Call of Cthulhu because they stormed this cult compound in the dead of night, and they got caught by the guards, and they ended up getting captured because they were just surrounded by people with guns and people that outgunned them, outnumbered them, and there really wasn't a chance in that game in particular to beat up 5 or 6 mooks and run away.
Yeah.
And that was because of dice rolls.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I would argue, like, so sometimes I would just put your players into predicaments that the normal player would find challenging, or
No, I see what you
that's
mean.
not a, yeah.
No, I see what you mean, though. I think it's put them in a situation it's going to be challenging to anyone, basically. You're outnumbered by tanks or whatever. I mean, maybe tanks are a bad example in a superhero game, but you know what I mean. You're outnumbered by X creatures that are more powerful than you, for example, or as powerful as you. It's like because I only have 2 players in my game right now, or 2 players that played the last session anyway. And I was thinking, and if I set 2 supervillains on them that were power level 12, they're PL10. Well, that would be significant. But more importantly, I think it's if you got character like I think that there's 2 aspects here. I think there's the aspect of if I divide their attention using their complications and stuff to make them less effective, that could be a way to also to make any individual opponent tougher. But then you also, and kind of put them through a gauntlet of different challenges. That could be a great way to make it feel intense too. Because I noticed this in the last game I ran where there were goons who were selling weapons or whatever, alien weaponry, but they were basically just normal people, and so getting rid of them was kind of like one turn's action for a player character. Making sure none of them could do anything was like, oh well, I pushed this exploding truck at them, whatever. And now they're scattered or they're down. And then the supervillain was a slightly longer set of encounters, but basically I've got to stop treating it like these characters are going to be around. Are going to be able to sustain for very long. I think is part of it, unless they're ridiculous, like we talked about earlier, like ridiculously high powered.
Yeah, and you can just have these opportunities too, just to see what your players would do in a situation like. I'm thinking of that scene in Kill Bill where the bride comes to the restaurant and she calls out the bad guy, the Lucy Liu's character.
Yeah.
And after that, she essentially Well, and then all of a sudden, like the crazy 88s come in.
Yeah,
All
you have
these
to fight a ton
mooks
of
with
people. Yeah.
swords, and I mean that really is a Call of Cthulhu. It's a not a. It's a really is a Mutants and Masterminds battle
It
because you
sure
have
is.
one person facing down 88 different like armed opponents, and then there's like a mini boss in there as well.
There's actually two of them. There's
Yeah, yeah,
the girl with the chain and the guy with his yeah, whatever. Anyway, there's at least two. It's been a while since I watched the movie, but yeah, I like that, and that's also a very anime thing to do. Like a very I'm gonna fight all these mooks. That's actually relatively easy, but fighting two people and then fighting Lucy Liu, of course, at the end is it just gets substantially harder every time we have to bring in every time we narrow down the field. When I like that a lot, I think that's a great way to think about it.
yeah, and you
In
can
Smash Bros.
and
Especially.
in a game like that, you can really emphasize like your party breaks into like the lair of the bad guy, and the bad guy just like snaps his fingers and out like all these like walls come up and just like 88 people with like baseball bats and knives and guns and
Yeah.
they're all just like because in Mutants Masterminds you can probably like replace every one of those swords with a gun and just have them all like just pointing at the your two heroes and you could start it where like and you could see what
can they do
you'd
about
have
it?
to
Yeah.
do. Yeah, what they
Exactly.
could because I remember a game I played with you in Mutants and Master. Well, you were the game master. Like one of our players had immunity to bullets, and there was this one scene where like just a bunch of mooks were just blasting him away, and he wasn't feeling a thing.
Yes. I do love, and that kind of scene is really cool, and like would be, and it's cooler when you put some emphasis on it, so then it just becomes part of the game. It's fun instead of just those mooks can't do anything to you, so we're just gonna hand wave it. I mean, even like, oh yeah, immune to bullets. Well, that's kind of fun. That's a fun trait. So you're walking through this wall of bullets because they don't realize they can't hurt you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I think that's a cool way to think. And I think honestly, so to review a little bit, we got the kind of the gauntlet of opponents, which is what we're just talking about. We've got the single super opponent, and putting all these together is actually probably what I need to do for a Mutants and Masterminds game. Which is very much like that Kill Bill. Basically, half the movie is that fight.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like to me is that sequence where the bride fights everybody in the in the restaurant and then fights Lucy Liu.
Yeah, because I would argue that not just with the Masterminds, but any game, your players are going to have a better time when they are able to walk away from a session and say, wow, we got through that. Maybe they got through it with the skin of their teeth, but it's gonna be a lot more than just like, oh, okay, here's a bad guy. I'm gonna put my fist up and we're just gonna, do the same thing we've been doing. But when they're really approached with like, like it's just like these brutes.
Yeah, wave after wave of henchmen, a couple, mini bosses, all this sort of stuff. And I think that's it. I mean, I think the key here that I'm taking away from this anyway is do it all at once kind of thing. Not all at once necessarily in the terms of how you're going to deploy it, but use every tactic that you can, and every tactic you add is probably going to make the game that much more challenging for the player characters.
Oh, sure, yeah. And when you have like and I think anime really does this well, where they have an opponent that's much more stronger. But there's just boxing anime out there. I forget what it's called, but they are very good in this one. Ippo, I think it's
Hijime no Ippo. Yeah.
Yeah, that one. Because in some of those, like the thing that the trick there's always something tricky that's going on with the other guy.
Yeah.
Whether it's a very unusual punch coming out or like a strategy that's just really weird. And maybe you have a supervillain like that just has this like once in a while, just like every time you try to strike them, they turn into smoke and they appear somewhere else.
Yeah. Oh, that you know what that and that's all part of the process of building up the importance of like an enemy, a villain. Like we've talked about that before. It's a lot like the pro wrestling. You know, you build up a heel so that the face can crush them at the end and beat them, and they'll feel significant. And that's storytelling at its most basic in a lot of ways, especially for action storytelling.
And of course, if you're a game master and you're listening, when you have a if things don't go the player's way, if the dice are not working for you, there could be an opportunity where you have where they get beat, your players get beat.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that really inspire, like, would the Rocky movies be as good if he didn't get beat at least once in a while?
Definitely not, right? That's basically that's the cool thing about the variety is the spice of life to some degree, right? That's just kind of the general principle there. But definitely amping up the challenge, making us feel something for the characters. It's how stories work. And it's and games, I mean, we were just combat may put the game in role-playing games, but the roles but the role-playing, the story is all the same basically as any other story in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and I would it seems we're really talking Mutants and Masterminds here, but
and we certainly have talked a lot about it. Yeah.
Well, it does give a lot more creativity to what opponents your players are facing.
Yeah.
Because this is why I love to watch like MMA, and I love to watch pro wrestling, because everyone has a different style. And just imagine that you're playing in a Mutants and Masterminds campaign and you come across a villain, and the villain, the first thing they do is just put their hands together, or they just start, doing, they put their leg up in the air or do some like weird little ballet thing, or just, some odd thing. And you're just like, what the hell's going on? Just really giving that. Yeah, like that, like keeping your opponent guessing is a huge idea. Is a huge boon when you're, in competition.
Yeah, it's a real and if you can mislead your opponent into thinking this is how you are, or if you can just psych them out, that's all great.
Especially if you do something like he stomps the ground, and he stomps the ground, and he fires his fireball, and you start giving away that tell. He starts doing the thing, and at the third time it was like, oh crap, here's another fireball, and they hit you with something totally different.
Yeah, and like become super fast or something. Yeah, it really just rush up on you. It could go. Yeah, I love that. I think that's a great concept, and just the misleading players can make a villain that's not got more raw power than them much more effective. That kind of thing. That's kind of what I'm trying to work with here. Is not like for henchmen and lesser villains, we don't necessarily want to just make them all like I was stronger than you all along, kind of thing. And I think definitely the psychological games is part of it, is part of hyping them up, and also the clever use of their abilities will be really helpful as well. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. If you can keep your players guessing of what's going to happen, especially if you establish something and then you change the tactic.
Yes, that's a great move.
It's going to mess with people. They're going to be like, what? No, he was supposed to do the other thing.
Yeah, you get the speed lines and everything, and that's a very anime reaction.
You could and it gets a little tricky, because sometimes your players will be like, oh, hey, you knew that we were prepping for the fireball. That's why it's like, well, like if they let them block a couple of like that move that they were doing.
Yeah.
And then when they go in for it again, and then like your players are comfortable, okay, here it comes, and they throw something totally different at you, they're gonna like be scrambling, like, no, we got to do something else.
Yeah. Oh, I'm making them scramble. That's when they feel that they're being challenged, and that's really important. So yeah, but we are really running low on time here. So
okay. So let's
yeah,
Tim,
we
is
should
there
wrap it up.
anything?
I'm good. I think I got a lot of good thoughts here. So I as far as this being another episode where I basically Tim asks for advice, this has been very helpful.
Yeah, I would just say keep your opponent guessing. But other than that, this has been a Mooks and Monsters. You can find us at mentalcellarpublications.com. You can email us at podcast@mentalcellarpublications.com. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter. I'm at Stagehead. Tim's at Teen Writer. We are hosted by Lipson, and we can be found wherever podcasts can be found.
Thanks for listening, everybody, and have a good one. Talk to you next week.